Good morning. I would like to call the Niagara Police Services Special Public Board Meeting to order for December 4th, 2023. My name is Jen Lawson and I am the Chair of the Niagara Police Services Board. We begin the meeting this morning by acknowledging that the Niagara region is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hatawindaronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Regional Municipality of Niagara Police Services Board stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship on the lands on which we live. I'll do roll call. Member Kiokio.
Present.
Member Gibson.
Present.
Member Kapasavanu.
Present.
Member Steele.
Here.
And we have regrets from members Yip and McKendrick. Do any members have any declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest? Seeing none, there are no minutes from any previous meetings, and I have no items to report as the board chair. Chief, do you have any verbal reports?
No, I don't have any verbal reports this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no scheduled presentations. However, the service will provide a presentation as part of its budget report listed as item 9.1 on the agenda. If I can have members Gibson and members Kapasavanu move for consent agenda items 8.1 and 8.2 that the information be received. Are there any questions?
So moved.
Comments? No, seeing none. All those in favor? We have to wait for Narai. Narai, if you can.
Yeah.
Thank you. And anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. 9.1, if I can have members Kiokio and Steele move that the presentation be received, and then I'm going to pass it over to Chief.
Hey, thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to recognize our staff here, in particular, Superintendent Mario Lagrateria and Laura Rulo, Deputy 40, really our whole finance team who turned around this report and presentation in very, very short order to meet the timelines that were requested by Regional Council. I do want to just point out one typo in the report. It was an error. If you turn to page 19 of the report, second last paragraph that deals with the digital evidence management system clerks. So in the paragraph or the sentence starts with furthermore 1,431 pieces of evidence. That should be furthermore 331,431 pieces of evidence. So it's considerably larger number. Okay. All right, thanks, and I'll commence with the presentation. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Lawson, for the opportunity to meet this morning to present and discuss the revisions that we've made to the 2024 proposed operating budget following the presentation that we made to the Budget Review Committee of the Whole on November 23rd. To recap, you'll see the initial operating budget that was approved by the Police Services Board on October the 12th, 2023. Looks like we're just running into some technical, there we go, that's right. And was subsequently presented to Regional Council's Budget Review Committee of the Whole. It included funding to sustain core services and to respond to external pressures. Sustaining existing core services to 2023 levels saw a base budget increase of 7.8 million or 4.3%. To fund the one extra budget day as a result of the leap year, saw $1 million or a 0.3% increase. Finally, the service proposed an increase of 2.3% over the 2023 approved budget to address the impacts of workload demands, excuse me, increased complexity of policing, technology advancement, maintaining a skilled workforce, and operational effectiveness through continuous improvement. Following the presentation of the 2024 proposed operating budget to the region's Budget Review Committee of the Whole, a motion was passed to defer the budget to the next meeting held this coming Thursday, December the 7th, with a request for the board to review the budget submission to look for cost-saving opportunities based on feedback received at the November 23rd meeting. Comments raised during the discussion at Regional Council that we will address in detail in the coming slides included utilization of shared services with the Niagara region, the affordability for region taxpayers, growth to be considered, not just in terms of community growth, but legislative changes and the impact of service growth as well, and the evaluation criteria that was leveraged and considered in determining the proposed program changes. Initial program changes were reviewed by our senior leadership team and scored using a program change evaluation tool, or PSET. Additional discussions occurred similar to those done by regional staff following capital budget submissions and the use of the Capital Asset Management Resource Allocation Tool, or CAMRA, recognizing that other mitigating circumstances not captured when using the evaluation tool may also need to be considered. The PSET tool used by the service initially considered the following criteria: risk, which was weighted at 45%, considered the safety to members and the public, regulatory compliance, member wellness, and the reputation of the service. Service delivery and operational impact was weighted at 25%, considered demands on the service, the financial benefit and benefits achieved through operational efficiencies. Community well-being was weighted at 15%, and it considered community safety and well-being plan of the region, improving community engagement, and proactive policing. And the final criteria was continuous improvement, which was weighted at 15%, and it considered technology, productivity, change, and innovation, as well as operational efficiency. Following the Budget Review Committee of the Whole presentation, further review of the proposed program changes was conducted by the senior leadership team. The following recommended strategies have been considered after the focus was primarily concentrated on the risk component of the scoring. Further broken down, risk assessed compliance regulation, officer and member safety, member wellness, and again, the impact of the reputation of the police service and the board. The first mitigation strategy as proposed is a transfer from the Police Contingency Fund Reserve of $500,000 to fund the one-day salary representing the leap day, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $500,000 or 0.3%. The 2024 operating budget is experiencing cost pressures of $1 million to account for the 2 additional salary days, where one day, the leap day, will not be required in 2025. Since the extra day occurs every 4 years, it can be considered a one-time cost, and therefore one-time funding from a reserve will not place an impact on next year's operating budget. While this recommendation has been put forward, the board must recognize that this will deplete the police contingency reserve by approximately 34%, thereby reducing the service and the board's capacity to mitigate any one-time operating cost pressures that could result in a year-end deficit. By approving this recommendation, the service and the board will be dependent on the region's tax stabilization reserve to cover any future deficits or one-time costs that could occur until such time as that reserve balance can be replenished. Second, the service recommends reducing the budgeted fuel rate from $1.65 per liter to $1.51 per liter, resulting in a savings of $180,000 or 0.1%. The budgeted fuel rate of $1.65 per liter was used in the proposed 2024 operating budget, and that was provided to us by regional staff. This proposed fuel rate was down from the 2023 budgeted fuel rate of $1.76 per liter, which resulted in net savings of almost $125,000. Consideration to further reduce this fuel rate assumption to $1.51 per liter for the 2024 operating budget is based on our actual year-to-date results. The actual fuel expense for 2023 is projected to realize savings of $0.5 million when compared to what was actually budgeted in the 2023 operating budget. Next, the service recommends reducing the civilian replacement budget by $150,000 or 0.1%. At the end of the third quarter, the service and board are forecasting a year-end surplus of $2.8 million for 2023. This is mainly due to savings within the civilian salary accounts, although these savings are the result of lags in hiring vacancies, which are not expected to continue into 2024. Nevertheless, the service is proposing a reduction in the overall civilian salaries budget for 2024, while it conducts a review of the replacement staff in essential positions at the department level in an effort to identify where savings can be achieved and whether these similar strategies can be used moving forward. As I referenced earlier regarding the evaluation tool, when we ran program changes again through the tool, we identified positions that, while not ideal, we feel are possible to defer until 2025. The service is recommending that we defer the request for one inspector position for investigative support. The budgetary request for an additional inspector position resulted from an organizational review of the existing service structure and current span of control amongst inspectors and superintendents. The review identified the need for one additional inspector within district operations to oversee district detective offices, relieving district commanders of the burdensome administrative responsibilities and allow for an enhanced focus on staffing frontline patrol, community engagement, and addressing political and community partner demands. The risk related to deferring this request to 2025 includes potential job-related burnout of key senior sworn officer positions resulting from an onerous span of control. In addition, district detective offices would continue to report to district commanders who unfortunately are primarily focused on frontline patrol, risking adequate and investigative oversight. The fifth mitigation strategy is removing the request to increase staff by one IT equipment support technician. As we looked for potential strategies, we examined the possibility of entering into a shared services agreement with Niagara Region IT or contracting out deployment of services to a third-party provider during peak periods. Preliminary discussions that we've had with the region IT staffing indicate that staffing could not accommodate the needs of the service at this time. The option to contract out deployment services with a third party could provide our IT department with greater flexibility while supporting the incumbent equipment support technician during peak periods. For these reasons, the service recommends that the board defer the equipment support technician program change to 2025 and support the option of contracting out services as a pilot project for 2024. We are also proposing to remove the request to increase staffing by one enterprise project coordinator. The intent of the two coordinators was to move forward the Office of Strategic Planning and Innovation with positions possessing professional management competencies to manage large, complex enterprise projects. Subsequent to the region's deferral motion, a mitigation strategy to consider would be to hire one project coordinator for 2024 and defer the second position for 2025, essentially taking an incremental approach. By adding one position, it will assist the manager in developing project management processes through the establishment of a standardized framework and focus on those projects identified as high risk projects only, while deferring the lower risk projects to 2025. If high risk projects overlap and exceed capacity of the one project coordinator, then the service can explore using the region's pool of project managers to support the need. We are recommending the inclusion of one project coordinator in the 2024 budget and the deferral of the second position until 2025, while the service explores opportunities with the region to utilize existing shared services of this very specialized skill set. Next, we have removed the request to increase staffing by one crime analysis supervisor. The intended creation of a crime analysis supervisor stems from a 2019 commissioned report on the status of the service's analytical program conducted by the RCMP. The hiring of this position would enhance training and enhance crime prevention and identify resource gaps within the existing crime analyst positions. The deferral of this position to 2025 can be considered with minimal risk, as this position currently does not exist. However, it's important to note that this service will continue to remain status quo with its current crime analyst programs, and any operational efficiencies anticipated with the introduction of this new position will be delayed for another year. The eighth mitigation strategy removes the request to increase staffing by one visual content creator. As outlined in the original program change submission, the risk to not proceeding with this additional resource is that existing resources will continue to struggle to meet the demands from a rapidly growing online community that seeks immediate information supporting transparency related to emerging events that are tied to public safety. The benefits to a proactive response to public safety initiatives, community engagement through social media, and internal communication strategies, unfortunately, will be delayed. We recommend deferring this new position to 2025 to address the affordability concerns regarding the levy increase as identified by the region. Next is the removal of the request to increase staffing by one digital evidence management system clerk. The service began staffing the DEMS unit in 2023 with the approved budget requests for one civilian supervisor and one DEMS specialist. With the purchase of cloud-based software for DEMS and two positions in place, the next step for this program included 4 additional DEMS specialists to be hired in 2024. To allow for service-wide implementation, which included the Connected Officer Program and the Automated License Plate Reader initiatives. Consideration to reduce the request to 3 clerks results in risk to the service and will impact the launch of the Connected Officer Program and the ALPR initiatives. As part of the mitigation strategy, the service can continue to utilize modified police officers to support the program through 2024 as it continues to evaluate resource needs for this new program. Using modified officers can impede the program expansion as their assignment is often short-term and turnover of modified officers is frequent. The service recommends deferring one of the 4 requested positions to 2025. Finally, we ask that the board consider a staggered implementation on the hiring of 20 frontline officers. 10 will be effective July 1st, 2024. The remaining 10 will be effective September 1st, 2024. We have carefully reviewed this program change for possible deferral to 2025 and considered risk, which affects compliance with regulations, officer and public safety, member wellness, as well as service reputation. To address the affordability concerns raised by regional councillors from the resulting anticipated increase to the tax levy for 2024, the service is proposing to stagger the hiring of the 20 officers. This staggered approach will save 3 months worth of salary and benefits for 10 officers in 2024. By delaying the hiring of 10 officers by 3 months, the service will not realize the benefits of these officers on the front line until 2025 and will continue to rely upon overtime to fill vacant shifts. Further, it's important for the board to know that this reduction to the 2024 budget will impact the 2025 budget by an equal amount because the 2025 budget will need to annualize the salary and benefits for the 20 officers for the entire year. While identifying the mitigation strategies that I have just laid out, all program changes were carefully assessed with the emphasis on risk analysis. The program changes that remain in the budget include changing 4 CPIC clerks to CPIC leads. As previously outlined, this is cost neutral with no impact on the budget as we identified staffing efficiencies within the unit. 1 uniform crime report clerk. When we reviewed this, based on the risk component associated to legislative compliance, expanding reporting guidelines, and overall service reputation, deferring this position poses great risk. 1 community-oriented response and engagement unit officers for 3 district, which incorporates Welland, Pelham, and South Niagara. Noting the significant growth in South Niagara and the increased workload demand placed on existing positions, we reviewed this program change for possible deferral to 2025. Considering the risk to compliance with regulations, officer and public safety, again, as well as service reputation. For this reason, the service is recommending that the 1 core unit officer for 3 district be approved and remain in the budget for 2024. 2 detective constables for 3 district. Again, these positions directly address the unprecedented growth that's occurring in South Niagara. While we have seen an increase in frontline patrol resources and street crime resources, we have not increased the detective office. When preparing last year's budget submission for 2023, should be noted that 4 additional detective constables and 1 street crime detective were initially submitted for approval. However, only 1 position, the street crime detective, was brought forward and submitted for approval, with the other positions being deferred until 2024. We have reviewed this program change again for possible deferral to 2025 and considered the risk component that scored high in reference to compliance with regulations, officer and public safety, as well as member wellness. For this reason, the service is recommending that the 2 detective constables for 3 district remain and that 2 detective constables be deferred to 2025. 1 major crime analyst. Currently, the major crime unit does not have a dedicated analyst. As the complexity of homicide investigations increases, so does the workload demand for thorough and dedicated analysis. When examining potential deferral, we considered the risk in reference to compliance with regulations, member wellness, and service reputation. In addition, due to the current workload experienced within the unit and the value that this additional resource will provide to homicide detectives, this position was deemed essential for 2024. 2 detective constables for the opioid enforcement and education unit. We considered a deferral to 2025. However, with the exponential increase in opioid-related sudden deaths, the investigative demand far surpasses the current abilities of the unit. 2 additional detective constables will keep pace while also supporting the objective within the board's strategic plan to reduce opioid use through an increase in the number of outreach initiatives. When considering the risk component, again, it scored high in reference to compliance with regulations and member wellness. For this reason, the service is recommending that 2 detective constables for the opioid enforcement and education unit remain. 1 constable for the training unit. Proposed regulations under the Community Safety and Policing Act outline additional training requirements for sworn and professional staff, which will expand the curriculum that must be delivered by the unit in the areas of de-escalation, mental health crisis response training, and immediate rapid deployment, as well as incident command training. With the new regulations to be enacted April 1st, 2024, deferral of this position to 2025 is not possible. The 1 network and security administrator, along with the increased complexity of policing and workload demands, the service is also seeing pressures resulting from financial and technological advancements. As the service continues to rely heavily on technology, maintaining a secure and efficient network infrastructure is crucial for safeguarding sensitive data, ensuring uninterrupted business operations, and mitigating the risks associated with cyber threats. While we considered the option of shared services with the Region IT as a possible mitigation strategy, the nature of this position requires the incumbent to interact with the RCMP, OPP, and intelligence systems and interfaces, which are restricted due to the need for confidentiality of information. When considering deferral to 2025, we considered the risk component, which scored high in reference to compliance with regulations, member safety, member wellness, again, as well as service reputation. For this reason, the service is recommending that the network safety administrator remain in the budget. 1 communications training coordinator. Finally, with the implementation of next generation 911, the service will see further training requirements within the communications unit for 911 call takers and dispatchers. Currently, there is 1 training coordinator that's responsible for all in-house training, recruit interviews, hiring, and basic training of all 911 call takers and communicators within the service, which unfortunately has created a potential for a single source of failure. The service has recognized that a second training coordinator is necessary to keep pace with current day-to-day training needs and recruiting requirements, and will mitigate the risk of a single source of failure. While we discussed the concept of a shared service model with the region, as recommended by the Regional Council, the skill set required to train 911 call takers and communicators for police dispatch would not exist within the region's current staffing component, as this is a highly specialized role. Despite the region having Niagara Emergency Medical Services, trained communicators, the role as it relates to police is very different. This type of trainer requires years of experience as a police 911 call taker and as a police communicator to be qualified as a communications training coordinator. Again, With the risk assessed for possible deferral to 2025, it's not possible to defer this position. Once all 10 mitigation strategies are taken into consideration, along with the remaining program changes, the amended 2024 operating budget consists of a base budget of 4.2%, 0.2% for capital financing, and 1.5% for program changes, with an overall increase of 5.9%. You will see outlined in staffing outcomes, there are 26 new sworn members and 20 of those dedicated to the stabilization of the front line, as well as 8 professional staff positions to directly support the operation of the service, while also supporting the board's strategic plan and the modernization of the police service. As detailed throughout this presentation, our 2024 budget approach is evidence-based and addresses the numerous pressures that are placed on the service, with a focus on risk when considering mitigation strategies for the board. The remaining program changes presented to you reflects the external pressures placed upon the service to meet workload demands, address the complexity of policing, increased technological advancements, and employer legislated statutory benefits. The impact of service growth to our amended 2024 operating budget is $2.7 million, which represents a 1.5% increase over our 2023 approved operating budget, for a total overall increase of 5.9%. This concludes our presentation. At this time, I would invite any questions from the board regarding the amended operating budget and the mitigation strategies that do come with risk, as I've outlined in the presentation. And I think it's important to note as well that all of the positions that we have recommended deferring to 2025 are important positions that support the board's strategic plan and our commitment to provide public safety to the community. And we are only deferring them to another budget cycle. So I just wanted to stress again that they are important positions. We are trying to work collaboratively and recognize the impact that our budget increase has on the taxpayers of Niagara region. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So appreciate all of the work from the staff and yourself, deputies, probably over the weekend to prepare for this. Obviously, it's very difficult. And you just indicated that you've done your best to address the affordability. Are there any, obviously there's a lot of considerations here to make, but are there any other further cuts that we should be considering? And if we do, what would the impacts of those be?
Again, we've done our utmost to come forward with what we believe is a very responsible and realistic budget. We totally understand the impact that a 5.9% increase has for the taxpayers of this region. But as chief of police for one of the largest growing municipalities in Ontario, I believe that any further cuts would potentially jeopardize public safety.
Thank you. So the other thing that I've noticed here, though, is I know we're referring to it as a 5.9% increase, but really, when I look at it personally, I'm looking at this as really a 1.7% request rather than a 5.9, because 4.2 is just to maintain our existing services. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Board members, do you have questions? Member Steele?
Thanks, Madam Chair. On our written report, it's item 7, the crime analyst supervisor. Within the full report, it's on page 17. It's referred to as item number 15. So this is something that we've been deferring since 2019, or it was in, from a report from 2019. Can you just give us a bit of a more overview of that position?
The crime analyst supervisor, the intent is to really totally enhance the capacity of our existing complement of crime analysts to address any gaps in data analysis and intelligence gathering. The position will be responsible for leading a team of crime analysts and leveraging their expertise to develop accurate and timely crime assessments, predictive models, and operational recommendations. The goal is, again, to establish partnerships with internal and external stakeholders, integrating data from various sources to produce comprehensive and actionable insights. The reality is the expectations placed on police services to investigate crimes, particularly violent crime, which we've seen an increase here in Niagara. Those expectations have never been greater. And the goal is to enhance the capacity of our crime analysts to assist us by providing actionable intelligence that we can then use to further investigate and solve those violent crimes that are occurring, and other crimes as well, but particularly those violent crimes which have such an impact on communities.
Thank you, Chief. So this position, would it come from an internal candidate, or would this have to be external?
That would have to be determined. We would have to, in all likelihood, assess whether or not we have the skill set within the service first before making a determination as to whether we needed to go outside of the organization to find somebody who had the desired skill set.
And then further to that, so if that was to take place, what kind of timelines are you looking at? Where would we be at next year in that actual person starting full time with us?
I think realistically, we would, if we had to go outside, we would probably be looking at a 6-month timeline.
Okay. I'd rather see that stay in. I mean, here we've got the RCMP recommending this after, you know, they've done a study on our police service. We're looking at it. This is a full year's costing of that position at 0.1%. So then we'd be down to 0.05% if it was 6 months in. They're looking at moving it again next year. So within the report that's in front of us, item 7, I would ask that to remain. So if we could vote on it separately.
Just to clarify, are you asking it to remain but only have budget associated for 6 months?
Well, wouldn't
or for the
well, if I understand it's going to affect us in 2025, 100%, but
right
in essence, for next year, we would only look at half of that 165,000, correct?
Correct.
Based on when you would bring that person on board.
That's correct. Yeah. Thanks.
So yeah.
Thank you, board members. Any other questions? Comments? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief. You can obviously appreciate the amount of work that went into this, going over everything with a fine-tooth comb to get reduced that $2+ million. Just I caution the slippery slope that we could be going on here. I totally understand the region, the deficit that they're looking at this year, and we, you know, as one of the ABCs, we have to do our part. And so we've done that. You've done I think, an excellent job reducing some of the items, referring them or deferring them until next year. But for the public, you know, because it's the public, that's the first one that we hear from that say, well, where's the police officer? It took way too long to get here. You don't hear from the police. You called them yesterday and I got nothing back. That's a result of just, you know, not keeping up with the level of crime that's going on, because crime is really becoming rampant. As our board had our last meeting, we had the cybercrime detective sergeant came in and reported on the predators online with kids and stuff. And when we hear that there was at that time 494, I think, outstanding cases that they hadn't got to yet, that they don't have the resources to do. And that's just one very small slice of the crime pie of all the crime going on. So right there, we hear about that, and we hear how inadequate we are in that area, trying to address that. So I worry about, you know, if we keep removing too much more, that there's going to be, we're on that slippery slope, and you may not see the effect of it this year, but you may start to see the effect of that in 2 or 3 or 4 years significantly, where the public is really impacted. And one of the things too is you know, somebody asked me, well, how come, you know, murder investigations are getting more complicated, aren't they? They're not. It's the same basic crime. However, the courts have increased and required a huge improvement in crime presentation, best evidence, and that sort of thing. So we are in no choice but to keep up with some of the bigger police services, because when they introduce a new kind of evidence gathering technique to the courts, then all the courts want that evidence gathering technique. And then you go to court, you don't have it. Well, why doesn't Niagara Region have this? You know, everybody else has it and you don't have it. It can jeopardize our cases. So keeping my point being that I think I agree that we need to do our part. I think what you've done here is really good. And I can agree with all of it that I've read through and everything. But I just worry about down the road for the public. If we keep reducing, our police service is going to fall in quality of service, and adequate and effective policing, which is the baseline of what we must provide, will start to be impinged. So just my comment, and that's more just for the public to, you know, that people say, well, it's a big budget and that, but you know, when you call 911, you want that police car, you want that ambulance, you want that fire truck there within the required response time. And to not support everything that we have here will start to potentially impact that. And it's a really significant thing when you dial 911, which I did a couple of years ago, and you're literally just, where's the vehicle? Where's the vehicle? Where's the vehicle? You're like, it's got to be there. So just my comment. I just worry that we don't want to get on a slippery slope here and start to, well, last year they cut the budget, let's do it again next year, and let's do it again next year. Next thing you know, we're not a first-class police service. We're, because of budget cuts and different areas where we've reduced our service. So just a comment for the public and my own thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Gibson. Member Kapasvanu.
Thank you, through your chair. Just want to say thank you to the chief for presenting this budget. And I just want to chime in on what Kevin has just said with regards to public safety and cutting this budget and every year deferring. I guess I've got 2 questions with regards to that. Chief, would you be able to give us maybe I don't know if it's possible in a figure form, what the risk is for having this budget cut every year for public safety? Because when you look at when you're looking at the calls that are coming in that are not being answered and whatnot, how is this cut impacting that?
I'm not
And-
sure I fully understand the question, Member Capisano.
Are we able to put into a figure or something that the public could understand easily what the safety impact of having a budget cut is? Because I agree with Kevin that we keep cutting the budget, or the budget gets cut and it looks okay on paper, but what does that actually mean for public safety in terms of policing for the public?
Okay, thank you for the question. I'll try and capture what it is you're asking. I think Member Gibson's comments really drive home the point that there are a number of areas within the service where we are right at our maximum threshold right now in terms of capacity. We saw the presentation from the Internet Child Exploitation Sergeant Jason Myers last month. And the reality is we are having to triage the most egregious incidents that are coming into our unit for investigation and not being able to get to what I would consider to be the less egregious cases, because they're all horrific. That's the reality. And so we saw on the front line, again, because everybody tends to equate policing to what they see driving around in the community in a black and white cruiser. If we deal with that, first of all, I can say that in 2022, there were 198 instances where we weren't able to meet our minimum staffing requirements, which is outlined in our collective agreement. 198 times we couldn't put the minimum number of officers on the street. I think it's important to say as well that in order to achieve the minimum staffing in 2022, we had to rely 715 times on cross-district deployment or deploying resources from another district, say from one district, two district, or three district, to another district in order to meet the minimum staffing requirements in those districts. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul in order to get the staffing requirements. So you can imagine what it's like when our staff sergeant comes into work. He thinks he has 3 extra officers in one district that he can use for some sort of proactive patrol initiative, only to find out that there are 3 short across the region, and then having to cross district or deploy those resources to other districts within the region, thereby creating a situation where at minimum staffing across the entire region. Many cases, even once that shell game or exercise is completed, we still don't meet minimum staffing, and we then deplete resources from our detective offices, which causes investigations to be delayed, which is not a good service that we're providing to victims of crime, obviously. So I guess in answer to your question, Member Capisano, the impact is felt on a daily basis, twice a day, as a matter of fact, when we try to meet our staffing obligations across this region. And that's not even touching or scratching the surface of all of our specialized investigative units, where we're really tapped out in terms of our resources, where we're again having to triage on a daily basis the calls for service that we're investigating. I hope that addresses your question.
So, thank you, Chief. It did, and I think I just want to add on to that. The basis for the cutting of the budget, from my understanding, most of it was placed around Bill 23, and we don't really fully know what the cost or the impact cost for Bill 23 for the region is going to be. But I know for a fact that it is going to increase the number of people that are going to come into the region, which means a bigger population to police. And so I'm worried that by the time we get to 2025, we are going to start seeing the impact of Bill 23 in terms of community build-up. And we have a budget that we have deferred costs for 2020-25 too, which may not be able to be met because of the number of people that are going to be increased due to Bill 23. So I just want to express my concern around that too, that, you know, we've got a community that keeps growing and we've got a budget that keeps getting cut. And I'm worried about providing adequate policing for the region of Niagara in 2025. Thank you, Chair.
It's something that I worry about on a daily basis. It's something that keeps me up at night, quite frankly. So concerns of this board are felt by every leader within the organization to ensure that we have the adequate resources to be able to address all of the public safety concerns that are occurring. You know, 5 years ago, we did not have the number of shooting incidents or violent crimes that are occurring now on a regular basis. And the impact that we're seeing from opioids and homelessness combined, and the impact from mental health, the calls for service that have resulted from that. Again, with trends not looking as though they're going to decrease anytime soon. In fact, the trend is upwards with no end in sight, quite frankly.
Thank you. Member Capisvanu, are you finished? Do you have any other questions?
No, I'm done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't see you, so that's why I'm just asking. Sorry, Chief, I just want to clarify something. Did I hear correctly? We heard that it's a 1.5% approximately assessment growth that for the number of people that were coming into the region?
Yes, that's correct. 1.5% is assessment growth.
Okay, thank you. So then at 1.5% assessment growth, we would assume that at some point we would need more police officers if we've got more people coming into the region. It's rhetorical, you don't need to answer. The reason why I'm asking these questions is because as our friends at the region have indicated to think that the board may not be objective necessarily in some of our thinking, we are actually objective in our thinking because we are educating ourselves as a board and board members, not only through public education on a regular basis, but by our board members attending different events with our officers and our civilians or senior staff to understand more about the challenges of policing. So I think it's a broad statement to say that we're too close to the challenges and maybe we're not objective to the budget. I would disagree and say that we are probably more objective to the budget because we have educated ourselves on the requirements. I know Member Kiokio, you have a couple of comments too. I'm going to make a couple here myself. I just wanted to understand, Chief, you had mentioned that there was 198 times that the minimum officers, that we didn't meet minimum officers on the street, 715 times on cross-district deployments to meet the minimums. I'd like to know what the effects on for staffing and member wellness is when we have to cross districts.
So that's the correct numbers for 2022, and those numbers are trending higher for 2023. So this was captured on November 23rd, and we were at 752 instances where we had to rely upon cross-district deployment. That number will, likely be in the neighborhood of 900 times that we're by year end. I don't have the number of instances for 2023 in terms of when we're not able to meet our minimum staffing. The impact on member wellness is significant. You can imagine what it's like coming into the workplace thinking that you've got additional resources to assist, only to find out when you show up for briefing that you're at your minimum staffing again, or worse, not being able to meet your minimum. We have a younger workforce who have a much better grasp, I guess, of work-life balance, and where they're not interested in working overtime. So that's our only option is overtime. Once all of the other avenues have been depleted in terms of cross-district deployment, depleting from our detective officers, there's no other option once overtime is exhausted other than to go short. And that is not, it's a disservice to our community, and it's a disservice to our members, quite frankly, on their mental wellness.
Thank you. So just to kind of confirm, I guess money is obviously not the driving force why people want overtime. It's just people are coming in for overtime because they feel some sort of sense of duty to come in and help cover their colleagues when they're very short. I don't think when people are paying overtime is necessarily a unique challenge to policing. It sounds like it's a challenge across many different areas. People just don't want to work overtime because they want to have that better work-life balance, and they need the break because, quite frankly, when you've been at work, and especially probably seeing the things that officers see on a day in and day out, they need that break, and they don't need to necessarily be coming back in for another full shift afterwards. A couple of comments to the original or the earlier slides. So the police contingency reserve back in 2020 through 2022, 2020 and 2021, obviously we had during COVID years, we gave the region covered us for the slight deficits. I think it was 284,000, 299,000. And then 2022, we gave back $1 million to the region. So rough calculations were probably around 417,000. That would have probably covered off the extra day of pay that we would have we would have been around 500 versus the 417.
That's correct. Using your math, that would be correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we wouldn't have been asking for the extra $500,000, and we wouldn't be taking out of the contingency. I'd like to know about the hiring vacancies, the legs for the civilians. I know that that's part of, when I was reading through, that's part of the reason why we're going to have a money that's giving back to the region this year. So I'd like to know the impact on the service, because obviously I know people, as you've already alluded to, people keep thinking of policing as just seeing the police officers on the street, not recognizing that there are support staff in the background that have to also do a number of work and things like that. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about the impact, the vacancies from the civilians.
Sure. And I think in the presentation that we provided in the information session to regional councillors, as well as in the presentation that we did at the Budget Review Committee of the Whole, we talked about the anatomy of a call. And that was really to visualize the amount of resources that are required in response to a call for service that go well beyond the frontline officer that you typically see at a call. And our professional staff that we have play an integral role in ensuring that all of the multiple layers within the service are staffed, and we're fulfilling all of our legal obligations. Like many organizations, post-COVID, we struggled to find specialized staff for some of the positions that were posted in 2023. As an example, our psychologist and our clinician, we have a return to work specialist, again, trying to provide those wraparound services where if members are feeling stressed because of what they're being confronted with on the job, whether it's our civilian staff, who sometimes it's more difficult for them, saying our communicators as an example, because they're not necessarily seeing what's happening. They're hearing what's happening, which I think sometimes can be worse. So the impact is increased absenteeism from the workplace. And to address that, we're trying to, again, provide those wraparound services by hiring a psychologist, clinician, return to work specialist, with a goal of maintaining a healthy, productive workplace, so that when they are unwell, we have supports in place to ensure that their health remains a priority, and we have them return to the workplace healthy and productive, and more importantly, they're in a much better frame of mind, obviously, to be able to serve the community as well.
Thank you. Another question regarding the enterprise project coordinator, so deferral of one. You indicated about the connected officer program and the ALPR initiatives. I just want to make sure that by having only one for right now, we're still going to be able to meet the demands, or are we stretched too thin? Do we need the second one right away?
Our goal is obviously to have those programs continue, because we believe that there is tremendous value in being able to have the connected officer program and the automated license plate reader program fully recognized for the benefit of the public and for the board. The automated license plate reader program has the capacity for in-car camera, so to be able to record traffic stops for when our officers respond to calls for service out on the road, or when they're involved in a traffic stop of an impaired driver or traffic infraction. The potential is there within the ALPR systems that we've invested in to be able to employ that technology. That said, we will require resources to be able to move that forward. And again, when we look at the anatomy of a call, it's an officer pulling over a car. It's having the technology to be able to access and utilize the cameras, then to be able to use our DEMS clerks to be able to provide the disclosure in a timely fashion to the courts, so that we have the evidence to support it. Not to mention the FOI, Freedom of Information requests that will undoubtedly come in as well, to be able to address those requests in a timely fashion as well. So again, it's much more than just a traffic stop. So our goal is to continue pressing forward with that project. I think at last count, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 projects that we had identified within our IT realm. And we're, again, triaging those programs. Obviously, the Connected Officer program, the ALPR program have highest priority for us. And our goal is to continue pushing forward with those projects. The other lower risk projects will ultimately be sacrificed as a result of not having a second project coordinator.
Thank you. And then another question here is the shared services with Niagara region. I appreciate that you've kind of taken a look at what we can accommodate and what we can't. My understanding, and maybe our regional council members can talk to this, But my understanding is that currently all municipalities, including the region, are struggling with either getting planners or building department. So I guess my concern would be is if we did look into shared arrangements with the region, do they have the capacity and capability of actually helping us when they've indicated themselves that they're struggling and the municipalities themselves are struggling?
The reality is from our discussions with the region is they are struggling as well. They do have project managers who are focused on facilities. We believe that there's an opportunity to attract people to fill the position internally here within the service, which again, optimistic that it would have an immediate impact and go a long way to addressing the long list of projects that are outstanding within the service. Again, all identified, many of them through our own members, using a Kaizen model of trying to improve processes to make us more efficient, all of the things that regional council would like us to be more efficient, all of the things the public expect us to do to be more efficient. That's our goal. That's our ultimate goal.
Thank you. I noticed on slide 11, when we looked at our original presentation that was back in previous presentation to this one, projected service outcomes. One of the items that's missing is enhanced community engagement. So when I look at the projected service outcomes from our service growth for the amended operating budget, we're just, from what I'm reading here, is we're just basically keeping our heads above water.
Are we talking about frontline officers or what area specifically?
I think just probably the service in general, because again, when we look at the frontline officers plus the support staff that's required, there's got to be some sort of ratio. And I'm not asking for the ratio because it's not relevant, but for every officer that you have, there are going to be so many support staff that's eventually required, along with the equipment that goes along with it and everything else. So from the way I'm reading the amended operating budget is, we had heard from you originally saying that you did not put forward the budget that we really needed. You put forward the budget that we needed to sustain. And then we were asked by the region to actually cut that budget even further. So I guess that's what I'm looking at here is we're really looking at a budget that is just going to keep our heads above water for both the frontline officers and our support staff that's required.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. As I mentioned at the end of my presentation, the positions that we have deferred are what we identified through our program change evaluation tool to be necessary based on all of the criteria that were discussed during the presentation. So, and that doesn't include the program changes that didn't make it to the budget presentation. Again, as growth continues, as Member Kapasavanu highlighted, and the impact that this region is going to see from people moving or relocating to Niagara in mass numbers. Based on the predictions alone, I think we have seen well over 20,000 people per year, year over year. And looking out well beyond 2024, those numbers will continue. So yes, I would agree that what we're asking for is really just to keep the lights on and to ensure that we're able to provide adequate and effective policing to the community.
Thank you. Member Kiokio, you had questions?
Yeah, a lot of them have been answered. Actually, I just have a comment. First of all, I want to thank everybody for the, bringing this forward today. I know it's been a short notice in that, and I do respect all of you here, our frontline staff, the whole service. Just coming on board here this year and as a board member, I learned so much from the service, and the activities that I've attended, and most of what I've received was on last 2 Mondays ago when I did a drive along with an inspector, Siri, and also sat in communications myself for 3 hours, listening to 911 calls coming in, just experiencing that. I know, Chief, you're always saying that the concerns, the challenges that you're facing, that the staff are facing. Well, I've seen it first, to actually see it and hear it. These calls coming in one after another, and this is on a Monday evening, from 3 to 6. I sat in on it, and at one point, I believe there's like 35 or 40 calls waiting to be answered, not answered, but for officers to attend to these calls. And they had minimal staff. And again, I know Board Member Gibson says, people wonder why. Well, why isn't an officer here right away? Well, it's almost impossible for that to happen when you're on minimal staff and you have call after call after call coming in. I couldn't even have the opportunity to have a conversation with a communication officer because she was so busy with all the calls. And just the time that I sat there, it was stressful for myself just to hear it and I commend our communication officer. She was fantastic, and how she dealt with the public, the people that are calling in, and the mental health calls are coming in, the domestics calls are like, I was so amazed. So I just wanted to share my respect for all of you that come in and do, make our region that much safer. And I agree with Board Member Gibson, is we need to be careful moving forward. I think we have a good strategic plan in place that we should be following, but again, there's challenges, with budgets and that, and this is one of them. So, but we can't keep cutting back like we have been, and I commend the staff for doing a great job to this point, and I will be supporting this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Any other questions or comments? So I'm just going to wrap up by saying that as we've not only had educated or we're educating ourselves, but we're educating our regional counterparts and hopefully the public as we do our presentations, that we probably all agree that we actually don't really want or need more police officers, but until we have better mental health strategies, housing strategies, and addiction strategies that's from the province, we do need more police officers at that point for now, until we get a better strategy. And that's beyond our capacity right now. That would be for the region to also advocate to the provincial counterparts to make sure that we're getting not just Niagara region, but as a strategy across the province, we have the proper supports in place. And until then, we do need more police officers because calls for service will continue to rise. So that being said, I don't think we have any more comments or questions. Sorry, Chief.
I just wanted to highlight a 6-hour window of time that occurred yesterday, in which in the city of Niagara Falls, so just one area out of the 12 municipalities that were responsible for policing, we had 6 calls for service to individuals who had overdosed on opioids that required EMS to attend given the overdose, but also required ourselves to attend out of concerns for safety for the paramedics, given the environment that they were potentially walking into. So 6 times in 6 hours for drug overdoses, where there was a real impact for potential violence that could have occurred. That again, those incidents are happening elsewhere in the region as well. And to Member Kyokyo's point that I think sometimes you hear of a hot call that may occur in St. Catharines, and people may jump to the conclusion that that's the only hot call that we're dealing with. We're juggling with a lot of calls all the time. I can't thank our communication staff enough for what they do on a daily basis. I can't thank our frontline staff, our investigators, who all do their utmost to juggle a high volume of calls and stressful calls. They do a fabulous job. And again, I think what we're asking for is a realistic budget that addresses the significant social impacts that are affecting this community, the gun violence, and the impacts of mental health and addictions in our community as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Member Kiokio.
Thank you. To add to that, and which I did forget to mention, was some of the another challenge that I've witnessed on that ride along that I had is that at one point in the evening we went to the St. Catharines Hospital, and there was four police vehicles there with, of course, 4 constables that were tied up. So every time there's a mental health call or whatever, a call where someone needs to be taken to the hospital, they face the same challenges that EMS does. They have to be with that individual. They cannot leave. Actually, the one constable we talked to was there for 3.5 hours, taken away from, doing his job on the road, being tied up at the hospital because they cannot just leave him and carry on. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, because I think that's something also regional council need to hear, because that is a big factor in an evening when you have 4 constables tied up and you're leaving the community shorthanded once again, especially when there's so many calls coming in. That evening we've seen 4 officers, 4 vehicles, and 5 EMS ambulances all tied up at one point. It was just amazing.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for those comments. The reality is that's a pretty regular common occurrence, occurs day or night, and often the number of cruisers is much higher than 4. We've seen as many as 10 or 12 cruisers all at the hospital. Again, drawing resources away from the communities that they're expected to serve and protect, and often tied up for several hours at the hospital while they're waiting for the individual to be treated for a variety of ailments.
Thank you. Members, board members, any other comments, questions? No, seeing none. Member Steele, you have a motion that you're putting forward? Are you amendment to them?
Yeah. We got a motion.
Oh, sorry. So I'm going to put, sorry, I want to make sure I've got the right section here. So for the 2024 operating budget request to review, which was moved by Member Kiokio and Member Steele, you have an amendment then?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll amend this, and I have Member Gibson to second this. So the very first line that says the board consider reducing the proposed 2024 net expenditure budget from $190,475,582 or 7.1% to $188,475,328 or 5.95%. And then if you go down to item 7 of the 11 that are in the motion, we include the request to increase staffing by 1 crime analyst supervisor, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $82,984 or 0.5%, which looks into this position being for 6 months in the 2024 calendar year. Hopefully Ms. Rollo can make sure my numbers are correct.
I've confirmed with Ms. Rollo that the numbers are correct. Thanks.
Sorry, and Member Gibson, you second that? Thank you. Okay, so the motion that's before the board is that the board consider reducing the proposed 2024 net expenditure budget from $190,475,582 or 7.1% to $188,475,228 or 5.9%. Sorry, 329,
Chair,
328.
it does round up to 6%.
That's
That's what I'm getting from my finance staff.
all right, we'll start again. That the board consider reducing the proposed 2024 net expenditure budget from $190,475,582 or 7.1% to $188,475,328 or 6%, resulting from the approval of the following mitigation strategies. A transfer from the police contingency fund reserve of $500,000 to fund one salary day representing the leap day, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $500,000 or 0.3%. Reduce the budgeted fuel rate from 1.65 per liter to 1.51 per liter, thereby reducing the net operating budget of $180,327 or 0.1%. Reduce the civilian replacement budget by $150,000 or 0.1%. Remove the request to increase staffing by one inspector investigative support position, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $238,744 or 0.1%. Remove the request to increase staffing by one IT equipment support technician, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $122,119 or 0.1%. Remove the request to increase staffing by one enterprise project coordinator, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $136,215 or 1%. Include the request to increase staffing by one crime analyst supervisor starting July. Sorry, a half-year position. Okay, so sorry. Include the request to increase staffing by one crime analyst, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $82,984 or 0.5%. Remove the request to increase staffing by one visual content creator, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $112,202 or 0.1%. Remove the request to increase staffing by one digital evidence management system clerk, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $96,041 or 0.1%. Approve a staggered implementation on the hiring of 20 frontline officers, 10 effective July 1st, 2024, and 10 effective September 1st, 2024, thereby reducing the net operating budget by $381,625 or by 0.3%, and submit the amended consolidated 2024 operating budget of the service and the board to the Regional Council for approval. All those in favor? And I see Member Capsunis, your hands up. So, and no one's opposed. So that is passed.
So now you got to do it as amended. You know, that's fine the way we do it here? Okay, all right, that's fine.
I think we do it different at the region, right? There we go. All right. Do any board members have any other new business? No, Chief?
No, I have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no in-camera reports, so the special public board meeting is adjourned. Thank you.